Hey, what is up? Welcome to this episode of the Entrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast. As always, I'm your host, Brian Lofermento, and I've got a guest who I think is equally excited as I am about today's episode because she is done with tax season, which allows us some room to breathe and allows us as business owners to really hone in on what the heck can we do to make tax season less painful. And that's why we've got an incredible guest to talk about exactly that. I want to tell you about her. So her name is Jazmin Cicotti. She has a bachelor's in accounting, and she is an enrolled agent, which is a process where you have to take 3 tests through the IRS just to specialize in tax preparation. She's a wife and a mother to a 1-year-old. She started Avid Accounting and Tax LLC a year and a half ago with the support of her husband, Matthew. And now this is so awesome to see her success already with a continued support and a great team. She's finally able to focus on the consultation and tax prep area of her business, which she definitely loves. It was something that was so clear to us as soon as I started doing my research on her and her business. And fun fact, Jazmin is making history in today's episode here on the Entrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast because this is the first brother-sister duo that we've had on. So you all know and loved James Hodge back in episode 546. So James is the one who referred Jazmin to us. It's so cool having 2 awesome people with great values and really passionate for business and what they do and how they help people here on the show. So I'm not going to say anything else. Let's dive straight into my interview today with Jazmin Cicotti. All right, Jazmin, officially welcome to the Entrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Heck yeah, I feel like I know you because obviously we've had your brother here on the show and he was an awesome guest. And that's why when I came across your work, it was no surprise to me that you are equally passionate in what you do, even though you guys do drastically different things. But fill in the gaps for listeners. Where does this passion for accounting and finance come through? Who is Jazmin on a personal level?
Well, yeah, like you said, I am a wife and a mom, so I feel like that's a large part of who I am right now, and the mom part is slowly taking over. It makes me want to spend more and more time at home, but that passion for accounting and it's not even like a love for math. I'll be honest, I actually failed algebra 3 times in high school. It's just really like a love for organization and helping small business owners keep more money in their families. Not just for themselves, but for the next generation, the generation after that, which we refer to that as generational wealth. And so that love for accounting and helping people actually helped me click with math. And so now I could do like calculus and, other complicated equations. But yeah, it's more just that drive for community, for families, and for people just being able to do what they want. Just like I want to do what I can with my business so that I can spend more time at home. I want that for other people.
Yeah, Jazmin, I love the way that you took that question. And I particularly love how results-based your answer is, because for me as a podcast host, obviously we've had 600 episodes here of the Entrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast. Tax and accounting is not among the top of topics that entrepreneurs want to think about. But you already, just in that one answer, you showed us the importance of it, is that if you focus on these things and you do these things right, the results are not, you get to check a box and say, I filed my taxes for the year. You get to check a box and say, I kept more money in my family's pockets and I was able to grow my business more. Talk to us about some of this. And obviously for listeners, we are recording this after the close of the tax year. So much of what Jazmin's talking about is not for you to sit down come April and frantically say, oh my gosh, I need to finish this stuff. We're really focusing in on what we can do throughout the year, Jazmin. So talk to us about the importance of that stuff when it comes to why should we care about taxes and accounting in our businesses when we've got a million other things to worry about?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's the last thing anybody wants to think about. I mean, even I avoid doing my own books. It's sometimes stressful because reality kind of sinks in when you see your books. You're like, oh, shoot, I didn't actually do as good as I thought once I run all my expenses, pay my taxes. And so there's like all this sort of like depression and stress around it. But if you can get excited about it and you can use those numbers to predict and project and to grow your business in the right way, then you can see, oh, because I did this, this, and this, I saved, $6, $7, $8,000, and that can now go towards my kid, my college, or back into my business to reinvest. So that's what I try to focus my clients on is, sure, like maybe you owed a little bit this year and it was a lot more than expected, but I turn that into, let's get excited about what we can do to change that in the future. And there's all sorts of different things that you can do.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I'm excited to talk to you about today, because as I was doing my research about you and about your business, that's the thing that really stood out is, there are a million different companies in the world that do bookkeeping. There are a million accountants and CPAs and tax preparers. There's so many different options out there, but Jazmin, you love tax. And for those of us who are running our businesses, we think of taxes as costing us money, whereas you so frequently in all of your marketing and your messaging on your website, you talk about saving money when it comes to taxes. Where the heck are those opportunities? Why are you so confident about us saving money by doing this stuff the right way?
Yeah, that's a great question. Everybody is so unique, and I guess that's another reason I love it so much is because I could sit down and get to know you and your family and your business goals, and then create strategies that fit you. So every consultation I have is different because it's based on your goals and your business. Even simple things like changing your entity can save you thousands in taxes, but you got to choose the right entity because it really depends again, like on your goals. For example, C corporations have this misconception that, you get that double tax and it's really not a very good entity structure. But if you're very focused on benefits, a C corporation has the most benefits for an owner. And so, that might be an entity that you lean towards. Or if you want to have your kids work in the business, then you got to stay in LLC or sole proprietorship, because if you become an S corporation or a C corporation, you don't have the tax savings. So it depends on a lot of variables, but that's the fun part for me.
Yeah, which leads us into, obviously, this could be a whole podcast episode in and of itself, just talking about business entities. But I know a lot of listeners, probably like me when I started my first business. I was 19 when I started my first business. And in my head, I was like, why can't I just start making money? Isn't that good enough? And the reality is yeah, I was a sole proprietor. And I'll never forget the day that I opened my first ever business checking account. But you're right. As I started growing, I realized, well, holy cow, when I hire people, there are considerations. When I want to have different tax situations, there are different setups that can benefit me. Jazmin, give us the introductory lowdown, because I'm sure you could give us a thesis on it, but really focusing in on, obviously there are so many entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs at all different levels listening, so I know there's nowhere to be specific to a single person, but give us that lowdown of what we should think about out of the gates, and what are those inflection points as we grow that says, hey, this is a good time to reassess what we're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. There's definitely some quick little points that you can check in. I'd say sole prop is the best place to start. It's the easiest. You literally just have to get a business license. Every state recognizes that. And, just get started on your business. And then as you grow, maybe when you're starting to hit where you're paid back for all your expenses, so you're starting to turn a profit, or if your business is high risk, so like a construction company, you're going to want to be an LLC or some other form that's similar to that because you have liability protection. And then S corporation is really great for tax savings, but that's going to be when your profit margin is really high. So you're going to want to wait until you're making a good, I'd say at least 40 to 50,000 every year, and that profit margin is just going to grow. And then that's when it's worthwhile for you to sit down and talk to a tax professional and see if it's beneficial to you specifically to turn into an S corporation.
Yeah, I love that overview. Gosh, do I wish that someone made it that easy for me when I was just starting out, which reminds me of obviously so many different listeners and so many different scenarios. But one thing that I constantly hear, listeners love emailing me, and you guys don't be shy. I love getting every listener email. But one thing that I often hear, Jazmin, is that a lot of people obviously start out as a side hustle. So they're still working their W-2 salaried position at their job. And then on the side, they're starting their business. Maybe they for sure have expenses. We know that. Maybe they're starting to have some revenue. What's the tax situation there? I know that that's a tricky time that holds a lot of people back from taking their business seriously, is it means they have to take this stuff seriously. So what clarity can you provide around the side hustle economy, which is growing every single year?
Yeah, absolutely. And I love seeing that. And I love seeing people have like 2 or 3, sort of ideas going on at the same time. I'd say like the biggest mistake that I see during tax season is actually a shyness around taking deductions. And so they just don't track them. And I can tell you right now, I have clients that lost thousands of dollars because they just didn't have the receipts or they didn't have a mileage log. So those simple things, you could get an app like Mileage IQ, and that will track your mileage just by swiping left or right, and it's free. And so just like little steps like that of tracking your deductions. I know it's like, again, stressful and it's the last thing we all want to do, but if you miss those deductions and then you come to tax time and your accountant's asking for these things and you don't have them, most of the time it's just like, okay, well, I just want to file, so let's just skip it. And they don't realize, yeah, well, if you skip it, you're paying and you're going to pay more than you should. And I say should because you can legally take those deductions. And so I personally believe you shouldn't pay more than you legally have to. But unfortunately, a lot of people end up doing that just from lack of bookkeeping.
Yeah, obviously that is also another big topic is deductions. And you're right, that for sure, for all of us entrepreneurs, we have no idea what we can, cannot, should be deducting. Walk us through that as an introduction for, let's think about, I know you mentioned manufacturing companies, for example, but let's stick to service-based agencies. I know that that's a big population of our listeners. So let's approach it from there. It's something I can relate to, you for sure can relate to, and I'm sure a lot of listeners can.
Yeah, so you of course just have like your equipment and things like that, but the expenses that are less commonly thought of or known, would be like mileage. That's like a really great one, but you have to have a home office, and that's kind of like something that's not really known. And it's pretty easy to have a home office. You just have to have a dedicated space where you do like invoicing and bookkeeping, keep your receipts, things like that. And then once you have that home office, you can track your mileage as soon as you leave your house. So that's why it's important to have that. And I recommend that to all of my clients. And of course, just other deductions, like office supplies, but it depends on your entity too. Like if you're an S corporation, you can now deduct your health insurance, you can have IRA contributions. So there's a lot of planning. Everybody's different again, so it's kind of hard to dive too much into it. But I highly recommend that you don't just get your taxes done, you interview your tax professional and you see if they are passionate about like planning and consulting, if they have that option, because then you can sit down with them. And I have my clients come in at least twice a year and they sit down with me and we do a consultation so that we can save on taxes.
Yeah, I love that. That's for sure what we're going to dive into next. I want to talk a little bit more about deductions because I'm thinking about all of my earliest expenses when I was an entrepreneur. So this is my teenage years, my early 20s. And I remember I was buying online courses that would help me with marketing or with website development. Obviously, I had a domain name. I had a website back then. All of those types of costs. Do those factor in, like if you are investing in yourself through online courses? Great example. Would that be something that we can deduct?
Yeah, great question. So there are startup and organizational costs that you can take. So how it works is you actually can't take any expenses until you make your first dollar. So you're kind of like building up this investment and you're not able to take on your tax return yet until you make your first dollar. And one strategy there, because you can only write off $5,000 and then you have to depreciate the rest over a certain amount of time. So one strategy there is to like invest up to $5,000 and then at least make $1, so that now you can start writing off all your expenses. And the benefit there is you'll have a loss because you haven't quite kicked your business into gear, but that loss will help reduce your other income, which will kick in, lower taxes or a refund. And that will help you actually get your business going because you have more cash flow.
Ooh, Jazmin, you just became yet another person who gave another reason for entrepreneurs to go make your first dollar. You just heard it actually benefits you tax-wise to go make your first dollar. So that is a great bit of encouragement there in addition to all the tax saving stuff that we're talking about. I want to segue into, because you brought it up, Jazmin, interviewing the right tax professional, because you're right. A lot of us are shy about doing things right, about maybe taking the deductions we should, because we just don't know. And a lot of people are shy when it comes to hiring a tax professional because we just don't know what we're looking for and what we're not. Walk us through that process of how to identify someone, because you're right, this is a long-term engagement.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm someone that loves interviews. I even interview my doctors. So I don't just go to somebody for help. I interview them and I pick between them. And I think that we should do that with everybody. So when it comes to your tax professional, I'd say I've kind of learned some things because I've had to work under quite a few different people. And so I've seen different characteristics that come out that aren't quite helpful. And so I'd say during your interview, you want to make sure that, again, they're passionate about the consulting part. It's not necessarily important if you're just an individual doing taxes, but when you're a business owner, again, I drag people in twice a year, and it is incredibly important that you're constantly checking in on the health of your business and taxes instead of just having it filed. So I love when my clients bring attention to me something that I may have missed or something that they're curious about, and we could dive into that, because when you're in tax season, you're so overwhelmed, you're not necessarily thinking of those things. So definitely find somebody that maybe doesn't have too much pride as well. They're willing to admit their mistakes. They're willing to talk about things with you. If they're not willing to talk about things with you, it's either because they don't understand it all the way and they don't want to admit it. So again, pride, or they made a mistake and they don't want to admit it. So they're trying to cover it up, brush it off. So you don't want that sort of character. And then I'd say also maybe check in on their degree, how much experience they have. I still make mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes, but you want somebody that has experience and is proficient in what they do.
Yeah, I love that overview, especially because you already mentioned that you like meeting with people throughout the year, your clients. And it's for sure. And Jazmin, I don't even need to confess this to you on the air, because I know you know this way better than I do, is that all of us entrepreneurs, we like to ignore this stuff until tax time. What is it about thinking about this stuff throughout the year that sets us up for success? And I know there's so many ways you could take this question, as far as keeping your books in order, so it's a heck of a lot more organized and pain-free. I know there are other considerations like quarterly tax estimates. Walk us through some of those throughout the year obligations and things we should think about so that tax time is less stressful.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the biggest one is that second end of year consultation I have with my clients, which is usually around September, October. And I do that one and I stress how important that is to my clients, because once December 31st hits, there are so many things that coulda, woulda, shoulda happened, and there's nothing I could do about it. So if you're just coming in, during tax time and you're oh, hey, I actually did really well last year. I made $100K. My expenses were low, which from a bookkeeping side is great, but from a tax side is not so great, because now you have all this profit to pay tax on. I'm just sitting there thinking, but you have kids. You could have paid them, or you needed a new truck. We could have just, got that on the books. You didn't necessarily have to pay for it, but we could have, got a loan, got it on the books, depreciated it. There's just so many things that I can't do, and so it's a little frustrating. So when I pull you in before we're able to talk and be hey, wow, you've got a few contracts signed up, you're expecting to hit this number, what can we do to save you on taxes? And so it's a conversation that goes both ways as well, because another conversation that comes up is hey, I want to buy a house. What do I need to do to, make sure my taxes line up with buying a house, or I'm going to have a kid soon, or we're getting divorced, married. There's so many things that happen, and it's really good to just have that open dialogue and conversation.
Yeah, I love that, because that also opens a whole new can of worms that I didn't even anticipate in today's episode, which is how closely tied our personal life decisions, personal financial decisions are with our business's financial decisions. Because you're right, buying a new truck may or may not be something we think about being related to our business, but it is inevitably. If you're traveling to clients, if you're driving to conferences, whatever it may be, that your personal decisions factor into that. And you also brought up kids, for example, about paying your kids. I know that's going to pique the interest of quite a few listeners, Jazmin. Can you talk more about that, about the outside life things that, when done right, whether it be kids, whether it be investments, a car, a house, whatever it may be, how that factors into our business taxes?
Yeah, so there's a border you don't want to cross, right? You definitely don't want to mix your business and personal life too much. The IRS definitely frowns upon that, but there are ways when you are self-employed to have certain things in your personal life become business, that you can kind of mix it the other way, and then that means your business pays for things that you would have had to pay for personally. And the reason why that's a great benefit is because instead of paying taxes and then paying for something personally, you just pay for it through the business and you reduce taxes. So it's a really great savings technique. Paying your kids, that's one of like the best ones. And you definitely just need to talk to your tax professional about your situation and your kids' age and things like that. Make sure that works out for you. But other things, they matter so much. Like people will just come in and they'll be like, oh, I got married. And I'm like, great, that's usually a beneficial thing. But becoming like divorced or having a kid grow up out of the dependent scenario, that's a huge hit to some people. The health insurance is a big one, because if your income goes up too high, you can lose your health insurance in certain states. So, that's a scenario that we are constantly looking at. And of course, buying a car, it's like, you got that personally, but we could have just bought that in the business under the business name, because that was your goal, was to use in the business. And so, that needed to happen or look a little different. So I like to have an open dialogue with my clients. I tell them that I don't charge them hourly if they just call me for a quick question, because I would way rather have my clients call me and be like, hey, I want to buy a truck. What does that look like? Than have them just say, hey, I bought a truck. And then now we have to like go back and fix certain things.
Yeah, I love that attitude towards it. It's actually something you said earlier in the interview that's really showing through in so much of how I feel as an entrepreneur. I'm sure a lot of other entrepreneurs feel, which is when you talked about we get shy about these things. So we just think, I just won't do it at all. And you talk about, well, there is that fine balance between personal stuff and business stuff. And obviously we want to keep them completely separated. And that's why most of the time we err on the side of caution, which is probably the right way to err when you don't know what you're doing. But we're just like, I won't hire somebody because I don't know if I pay them above a certain amount. Do I need to issue forms? Do I need to report their income to the IRS? What is all that stuff? And I know that that's one topic that brings this sort of shyness around, is that hiring. I remember when I started hiring freelancers from Upwork, they're all overseas. I had no idea what I was doing. Do I need to file anything on their income? Talk to us about that hiring process, particularly because it's part of the business growth cycle. Is maybe upfront, you can't take on a W-2 employee, so you are outsourcing. Talk to us about the 1099 side of the world, assuming listeners don't even know what a 1099 is. And then beyond that, what are the considerations as you start crossing into six figures and beyond, and you are able to hire? How does that change the game?
Yeah, those are all great questions. So, 1099 is if you just have somebody working for you as a contractor. And that's just the easiest way. They're going to have taxes on their end, so you don't have to deal with it on yours. And so you get to just pay them cash. For you, it means that you get to pay them a little bit more per hour, and for them, they get that extra per hour. And then they take their expenses and work with their tax professional. So anybody can just pay anybody up to $600 per year without having to give them a 1099 or a W-2. And I just went through the whole hiring process, working through all those kinks. And I'd say that when you first start thinking about hiring somebody, I would recommend just starting out with, hey, let's start slow, get you up to that $600 threshold, and then we'll check in there, because you're going to learn a lot hiring your first person. I know I did. And then they're going to also learn a lot. Maybe they're not quite the right fit, or maybe you're just not quite set up enough for employees like you thought you were. And so just hitting that first threshold of the $600, that saves a lot of hassles. You don't have to worry about any forms. Now you're passing that threshold and you have to think, okay, are they a contractor? Which means, are they independent? Do they set their own hours? I have somebody doing bookkeeping, and sure, I tell her, clients, and I have a quality expectation for the work. But she, other than meeting deadlines, works maybe at midnight or maybe at 2 a.m. She doesn't have set hours, and she has her own computer and tools and things like that. So she is a contractor. Now, if I had somebody coming into the office and I was like, hey, you need to be here at 9, and I'm providing, the office space, the computers, equipment, that's an employee, and I have to pay her a W-2, which means taxes and quarterlies and things like that.
Yeah, for sure. So much complicated stuff, I know, for so many of us, which even more so gives us a reason to reach out to an awesome tax professional like yourself. But one thing I want to touch on, because it's something that as I was doing my research about your company, Avid Accounting, which we're obviously going to give people the link at the end of today's episode, but I think it's fascinating how much you love the business consultation side of your business. You love looking into real businesses, because obviously, speaking more broadly here, it's hard to give specific examples as to where they can save. Obviously, we can talk more broadly. What is it that you look at when you're inside of a business from a consultative perspective? Are you just looking at financial statements? Are you anecdotally asking them questions? Are you saying, hey, show me your receipts? Like, what does that look like when you're looking inside of a business to even identify these areas?
It's a little bit of all of that. I've kind of learned how to look at things while they're talking, and most people don't realize they're giving me information. So even when I'm doing tax returns, I'll kind of just be plugging in data and listening to them speak, and all of a sudden they'll mention, oh yeah, we moved over here. And I'm like, hold up, you moved? That could be important. And so then I'll kind of start prompting them with more questions. So a lot of questions, a lot of personal life stuff comes up. That's really important. Again, like sometimes somebody might be, saving up for a new house. They might want to move. They might want to grow their business. Or maybe they're mentioning, hey, like, I don't really quite want to do this business forever. I'm curious about selling it. So then that's going to change the whole game. Like, we need to get this ready to sell. We need to start closing it down. I'm not going to, turn you into an S corp for like 1 year. So, a lot of those factors come into play. And then financial statements, spreadsheets, numbers are incredibly important for projections, and especially when it comes to hiring, like you mentioned, that's a big factor. Is, can you even afford employees? Are you aware of like the cost? The first 3 months with an employee is going to cost you the most. So are you up for that time-wise and financially? All those things come into play.
Yeah, and the thing that really stands out to me about that answer is obviously organization makes this a heck of a lot more easy and less painful as we're going through this process. But the other thing that you've mentioned today, Jazmin, is of course bookkeeping, because that factors into so much of what you've talked about throughout this entire session here today. And you already said towards the beginning, and it made me happy to hear this, Jazmin, that you were like, yeah, even I delay in doing my own books. Let's talk about bookkeeping for the average entrepreneur. Obviously, one option is to outsource it. One option you just alluded towards is spreadsheets. What's your perspective on the best ways for entrepreneurs who have a million things going on? What are the options when it comes to bookkeeping?
I think for most people just starting out, which sounds like it's a lot of your listeners, is they have like 1 or 2 side hustles and you're just kind of starting out, is to just do what works for you. Don't really stress about like, oh my gosh, I have to get QuickBooks. I have to, have all these systems that I don't really like. It's not jiving with me. I don't understand it. Just do what works for you. So my brother, James, he loves spreadsheets. And so that's what he sends me, is a spreadsheet for every business. I like QuickBooks because I use it every day, so that's what I use. I've seen some people do it by hand, and they just like that hand to paper sort of feel. They'll just keep a ledger, and then they give that to me at the end of the year. So whatever you do, just don't feel stressed around, oh, I'm not doing it this way or that way, and it's not perfect. As long as you have a record, that's what matters. And eventually, maybe you evolve into a better system or a faster system. But for now, just do what works for you.
Yes, so for all of you listeners, this is encouraging for all of us to hear from Jazmin, and it fits right in with what she actually wrote on her website, which is finances are complicated, taking control doesn't have to be, and it really starts with these baby steps. And Jazmin, we could go into so much stuff. I feel like somehow in less than half an hour today, we've already touched on so many different aspects of tax savings, which makes me really excited to share, or to say, and then also to share with our audience here today. But what I like to do at the end of these episodes is to somehow put the tough question on my guests. I'm lucky I don't have to do this, is to put a pretty big bow on these episodes and takeaways for listeners who are probably sitting there thinking, gosh, Jazmin, there's clearly a lot that I haven't thought about. There's a lot that I should be thinking about. What is something that you hope people walk away from this episode thinking, okay, if there's one thing I can do for the rest of this year, this is coming out in the middle of 2023, what's one thing I can do throughout the year to set me up for success come tax season?
Yeah, so I would say set aside one day a month that you're going to, do your method of bookkeeping to have those records, because if you lose that deduction, it's a big hit at the end of the year, and it's just going to make your life easier. And then start those interview processes with a tax professional near you or virtually, because you want to find that fit and have at least one consultation this year. It will change your life if you find the right person.
Yes, amen to all of that. I think it's so important. And as someone who obviously has been an entrepreneur for as long as I have, a decade and a half of going through painful tax processes, well, not a decade and a half of painful, but going through those tax seasons, it's been so much better once I've been organized and on top of this. Full disclaimer, Jazmin, you know I emailed you about this because I'm so excited with all my different businesses to have someone on board who is passionate about this stuff. So I love reaching out to awesome people like you, looking forward to our future conversations and collaborations, which I think is a perfect time to open the floor for you, Jazmin, to tell listeners where the heck they can learn more about you, your company, Avid Accounting, where they should go to find all the good stuff that you're doing to help business owners make this stuff more painless.
Well, I have a website, avidaccountingllc.com, and there's a lot of there's like forms you could fill out to reach out to me, or just, message me directly. And of course, you could just email me at Jazmin, Jazmin, at avidaccountingllc.com.
So you listeners already know the deal. We are linking to Jazmin's website down below, wherever it is that you're tuning into today's episode. So it's avidaccountingllc.com, as well as Jazmin is super generous, dropped her email address for you. So don't be shy about reaching out to her directly, but definitely check out her website. She lists out all the services, all the different ways that you can benefit, not only during tax time, but she shared with us so much today about why we should start thinking about this stuff now. Whenever it is that this episode is hitting you, now is the best time to start getting on top of it. So Jazmin, thank you so much for coming on, demystifying a lot of the stuff when it comes to taxes and business accounting for us. Thank you so much for joining us on the Entrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast.
Yeah, thank you for having me.